You know,
Are there other survivors? Hey everybody, welcome to the AtheistImpact. I am your podcaster, Xandar's Meteor, or you can call me Xandar, or you can actually even just call me Spencer, since that's my name. And this is episode 1 of what I hope will be a new tradition for either a weekly or a bi-weekly listening entertainment for all of you. We'll see how well this goes and how much I can adjust my schedule to fit in recording, so as it currently stands, I do not plan on making another one next week, but I do plan on having one out the following week. So there are a few things that I need to get out of the way. First of all, this is episode 1, so bear with me. I'm not cutting out any of the ahs or the ums, because it would take me absolutely positively forever to go through what I'm hoping is right at about an hour podcast and take out all the ahs and the ums. Plus, it kind of makes the sound disjointed. Those of you that are on YouTube, and those of you that have watched my videos, I actually try and cut out all of the ahs and the ums when I'm just talking, and most of the time, I'm actually scripted. As it stands this time, I'm not completely scripted. I do have a fair amount of notes here so that I don't get lost on what I'm trying to talk about, but I just wanted to make this as professional as possible, and yet at the same time I want it to be as real as possible. There's the possibility that later on this will be live. I'll take live calls, I'll take your questions and try and give you answers. There's also the possibility that this could eventually turn into an atheist experience type thing where I just let anybody call and I have those discussions with the people, and then put up the podcast later so that people can listen to it. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go or where this is going to take me, but it's something that I'm excited about, and I hope that you are too. Also, by the time that you guys are reading this, you will see down in the description box, or I'm sorry, by the time you are listening to this, you'll see down in the description box that I will either have links to take you directly into iTunes to find the podcast, and the Zune or the Xbox Music software, depending on if you use either of those. I should also have a direct link to the MP3 down in the description box below. That way, if you want to take me on the go, you can have Xandar on the go, or AtheistImpact on the go, depending on which one you guys are associating this with. The quality for the downloads and on iTunes and on Zune are going to be less due to size factors. I don't want to fill up your entire media devices with one podcast. So obviously the best quality sound is going to be here on YouTube. Those of you that are not on YouTube and listening to this out there in the rest of the world, hello, and I definitely encourage you to stop by YouTube and look me up. So as time goes by, I'm going to have this process a lot more streamlined. I'll be able to release new episodes on a regular basis. But for now, this is step 1, so step 2 is going to have to wait. I'm sure that there are a few people out there that have a few questions. One of the questions that I think you guys might be wondering is, what's this podcast even about? Well, other than the name, which is pretty obvious, this is about atheism. But it's also about the impact that atheism has had in this world, especially over the course of the past, we'll say 10 years. And I haven't been an atheist for even 2 years yet, and yet I have already found that atheism is a much more prevalent thing in our society than I ever believed that it was, or I ever even knew. I was uneducated when it came to atheism because no one had ever even talked to me about it. I had one friend I remember from back when I was 19 or 20 who didn't believe in a god, and we never really talked about it. And he didn't identify himself as an atheist. And so I didn't really even know what an atheist was. So the amount of information that I have gleaned in the past 2 years, converting from Christianity to atheism, deconverting out of Christianity back into atheism, is something that, it's been an awesome, eye-opening experience for me, because the world is a much different place when you're not viewing it through religious eyes. So, pretty much, the podcast is about not just me, but also it is about me, since I'm your host, and it's just about how I've moved beyond the chains of religion, and how moving into this new stage of life has completely and totally changed everything about the world to me. for 33 years, which I'm almost 35, so for the first 33 years of my life, I was under a heavy burden of religion and religious indoctrination. And so once I did make the deconversion back to atheism, I have had to re-examine every aspect of my life, and I've thrown out all belief in the supernatural, and this is mostly about, it's going to be a podcast about what I've discovered and how my life has changed, and just the general discussion about religion in our country. And I say our country because I am in the United States. That doesn't mean that I'm never going to talk about anything outside of the United States, but that's the area that I am most affected by. And so this will be a very U.S.-centric podcast. And also what we as atheists can actually do to help change the world. Because we are changing the world already. Things are changing at a very quick speed. I know that if you listen to, I believe it's in the intro to the Atheist Experience it's in the intro to the Thinking Atheist podcast, where you hear Sam Harris talking about how the non-religious is the fastest growing group of people in the world, and at least in this country. And I've seen other stats over the years that eventually we will actually go into in some podcast when we talk about the rise of the unreligious. That's one subject that I have listed to go through on a future podcast. And just, it is growing, and it is a bigger thing, and it's more in the forefront. Bill O'Reilly wouldn't have David Silverman on his show, we'll say 5 or 10 years ago, although he probably was on 5 years ago. We'll say 10 years ago. Never would have even thought about it. And personally, I never would have even tuned in. Not that I would, well, actually, 10 years ago, I probably would have tuned in to Bill O'Reilly and shook my head and agreed with everything he said. And I have changed the majority of my political stances as well as my religious stances, obviously. So, why am I even doing this podcast? Well, one of the reasons is because I want to actually increase happiness in this world. I want to help remove the shackles of religion that are on people, that hold them down and keep them from seeing themselves as awesome people, as awesome creatures. And I don't believe that religion actually gives you that feeling. There are some benefits to religion, but as has been stated many other places, none of the aspects and the positive aspects of religion are something that is exclusive to religion. Religion is no different than finding meaning and finding happiness and finding a place in this world is no different doing it with religion or without religion, which means that you don't need religion in order to answer those questions. And I also want to be a voice in the increasingly crowded society of plugged-in people, is what I'll say. And I don't mean plugged in as Matrix-wise, but more along the lines of the fact that we all walk around and we're very plugged into the world. We know what's going on in the world, all over the world, just by getting on Twitter, depending on who you follow, obviously. But you could jump on Twitter, and you can find out everything that's going on in the world without ever having to actually even leave Twitter. And you can continue to have discussions and get clarifications. And Facebook and, I'll say Google+, even though even myself being on Google+, nobody really seems to use it. But that's beside the point. So everybody's really plugged in, everybody's really connected, and the world has become a much smaller place, where things that happen in the weird, obscure places suddenly are brought to the forefront of on a national level, because someone brought it up and started talking about it, and it just spread by word of mouth via the internet. And another reason why I want to do this is because this is something that I'm passionate about. In the past 2 years, I have spent, I can't even say how much of my life in the past 2 years I've spent dedicated to either researching religion, researching atheism, listening to all of the debates, and continuing to listen to the new debates that have come out by other people arguing for the existence of God, trying to figure out the change in where I believe more morality comes from and morals come from. It's just I've spent so much time, and this is such a passionate thing for me, that I want to continue this, and I want to have this discourse. I want to have the conversations with other people about what we're going to do to change this world for the better. Because I truly and honestly believe that we actually can change this world. There are a lot of people that are extremely apathetic about things, and they don't view having a shared common belief such as atheism as anything enough to rally people together and to actually bring them together in order to effect change. But I know for a fact that that's not true. I've seen it happen. Jessica Alquist, there's a perfect example of one person making a stand and getting the support from the atheist community and completely and totally changing the end result was that it just changed a rule in the school, but it also brought about court rulings, and it did change things for the future. So we can make a change. And I know that my own personal story has made changes. I have received multiple messages over private message on YouTube over the past 2 years that have said, "Thank you so much for telling your story. There are people in my life that have never understood because I haven't ever been able to put it into the good words that you have put your story into. And when I play them this video, they understand what I'm talking about. They understand where I'm coming from." And there are other people, I think with every single video that I have posted up, someone has jumped into the comment section and they've said, "I know exactly what you're talking about. I used to believe in the same way. I used to act in the same way. I used to be told that this is how I should act," etc. So I know that I'm making a difference. And that's awesome. That makes me feel good. And it makes me want to do something like a podcast so that I can have even more interaction and branch out beyond YouTube so that people can, A, get to know who I am, get to hear my story, and also have those conversations. Have that discourse occur, because we need it. We need to talk about these things. So another question that I did come up with that I thought maybe somebody might ask me is, do I believe in anything supernatural? And the answer to that is no. If I don't understand something, like an event or a story, I will do my best to investigate and find the answers. But sometimes that answer stays, I don't know. And in the past, I wasn't always okay with that. And I've become more comfortable with saying I don't know. And it's not, I don't know, and now I'm done, and move on to the next subject. From time to time, yes, it is. There are some things that are not unknowable in the grand scheme of things. There may eventually be an answer, such as the question of what came before the Big Bang. It's a non-question from some of the people that I've heard. I believe it was Stephen Hawking that said that it's not even a question that can be asked because it doesn't make any sense, because time and space became what they currently are at the moment of the Big Bang. And so looking for evidence beyond that is possibly impossible. We don't know for a fact, obviously, so we have to stop and we have to say, I don't know. And I'm okay with saying I don't know. And then there are, like I said, there are some times when I actually just stop. I say, okay, I don't know the answer to that. I probably in my lifetime will not have an answer to that. Doesn't mean it's not knowable, and it doesn't mean that it's not something that eventually we'll have an answer for, but I don't know, and I'm okay with that, and I'm not going to fill that gap of knowledge with a god, or angels, or demons, or ghosts, or spooks, or poltergeists, or whatever. There was one thing that happened in my life that really sticks with me on, I won't say a daily basis, but we'll say about a monthly basis. I think about this. And it was the night that my grandpa died. He was my dad's dad, and he was sick with cancer, and he was in hospice, and he was in hospice for a few months. And we all kind of expected him to be in hospice for maybe a month. And so there was that time period where we thought, okay, he's going into hospice, it's over, grandpa's going to die. And so we all kind of mentally prepared ourselves for it, and then he ended up living for a few more years, or not years, lived for a few more months, and we never expected him to get better, and neither did hospice. But when the time came that they said, okay, now it is actually the end, and it's only a matter of days. And so mentally I was prepared for my grandpa dying, and mentally I was prepared for the reaction to that. And on the night that he died, I was living in Oklahoma at the time, and My grandpa was in Ohio in hospice, and he died that night, and I woke up in the middle of that night, and that's not completely rare for me, but it is a little bit weird that I wake up and I actually pay attention to what's going on. And I woke up, and my dog at the time was laying on the bed, and he was wagging his tail. Now, two things. One, I don't know that my dog was wagging his tail before I woke up, or if my dog was wagging his tail because I woke up. The dog that I had at that time was actually always really excited when I woke up because he got to go outside. And so there's a possibility that he heard me rustling around, started wagging his tail. But nonetheless, I woke up. It was the middle of the night. It's dark. My dog's wagging his tail. And in my mind, I said, I know what happened. My grandpa is dead. And I knew that he had died. And it wasn't any kind of revelation. It was essentially me putting all of the pieces together and saying, and being prepared for it, being prepared for my grandpa to die. I wake up in the middle of the night, my dog is wagging his tail, and because I believed in spirits, but I believed in souls, my belief at the time was that my grandpa was coming and saying goodbye to me. No one's ever said that you can't say goodbye on your way to heaven, and so there was no reason at that time for me not to believe that it was possible that my grandpa was actually, the soul of my grandpa was actually in the room with me saying goodbye. I woke up the next morning, I wasn't really thinking much about it, and I got a call about an hour or two after I got up, and it was my sister, and my sister told me that my grandpa died. And I pretty much said, yeah, I know. And we had a quick conversation, and then that was it. So, the only real, what I'll call, with scare quotes, supernatural experience that I ever had in my life is something that, now that I look back on it, had I not received that phone call from my sister saying that my grandpa died, and had my grandpa not died that night, or had my grandpa died 5 minutes before my sister called, I wouldn't think that what occurred was supernatural. I would just chalk it up to the fact that, like I said, I was prepared for my grandpa to die. And so anything and everything, the phone ringing, everything was a sign, everything, because I was looking for it. I was waiting for it. I was looking for the mysterious to prove to me that there was something beyond just death. And I was, we'll say open-minded, but I would say I was open-minded to a fault in the sense that I was translating everything. I was translating every single thing that was happening to, oh, my grandpa died, there's his soul saying goodbye to me, and my dog, who, again, I don't know where this comes from other than just stories that I heard when I was younger, but I don't know why my dog would be able to recognize that my grandpa's soul was in the room, and why I would be able to, etc. So the only real supernatural thing that ever happened to me can be explained by my own mental state at the time, and the simple fact that I knew that my grandpa was going to die. Is it still a little bit strange? Is it still a little bit weird? Yeah, it really is. And I still have those times where I actually doubt that. I still have my doubt in not believing. It's not that I doubt and think that I'm wrong. It's more along the lines of I feel like there's just a part of me that still doesn't fully, I don't know. Those of you that have deconverted from Christianity, you still have your moments. There are still those times every once in a while where I don't fear hell, but I do wonder, well, what if I am wrong? And it's not a Pascal's wager sort of experience or argument. It's just more along the lines of, this is what I had pounded into my head for 30 years of my life, and now I'm trying to buck that, and I'm trying to get it out of my head. But as everybody knows, when you're conditioned, when you're indoctrinated, it's really hard to break that indoctrination. It's really hard to break that conditioning. It's a perfect example is both of my dogs that I've owned over the years are both gone. I don't have them anymore. And yet when I drop popcorn on the floor or any food on the floor, I immediately think, don't worry about it, the dogs will get it. I haven't actually had a dog for over a year now, and yet my reaction when I drop food on the floor is still, don't worry about it, the dogs will get it. And then I have to remind myself, there are no dogs. So, you know what it's like, you know how it is when you get indoctrinated and when you get habits and when you build those habits over years and years and years. So I don't fear hell. I don't believe that hell exists, but there are those moments that I just kind of wonder, ugh, what if I'm wrong? But then I remember, if I'm wrong, I'll find out later. Also, if I'm wrong and hell does exist, I'll see a lot of you down there, and we'll try and make a good time out of it. So anyway, the quick answer to do you believe in anything supernatural is no. Also, just questioning in general was something that went away. God never answered the questions that I had for him. And when I say God, I want everybody to remember that I'm talking about the Christian God, Yahweh, because that's the one that I knew. That was the one that I believed in. I say knew as in that was the one I knew from my life and from my religion. So when you can throw in he works in mysterious ways as an answer, then you generally tend to stop asking questions, because what's the point? Every question that you run up against that you don't have an immediate answer for is, oh, that's just the way God works. Another anecdote is I went into and got my hair cut one day, and I asked the lady, I said, hey, what is it that actually makes hair patterns grow? Because my hair on the back of my head grows kind of upwards instead of down, and so it's all this swirly crazy stuff. And my facial hair does the same thing. It all grows over to the right until it reaches right under my ear, and then it all goes swirly, so I can't grow really good sideburns, which drives me nuts. But I asked it, I said, what makes hair patterns? Is it the way that you're laying in the womb? What is it? Is it genetics, et cetera, et cetera? And her answer was, I don't know, but I've just always said that that's just the way that God made you. And it's like, well, that's not the answer I was looking for, but, it's a great way to deflect, and it's also a great way to not actually have an answer, because that's not an answer. That's the way that God made you is not an answer. That's the same as saying, well, he works in mysterious ways, and so your hair grows the wrong direction on your face. Okay, whatever. So I'm sure that you guys are going to have some more questions for me, and especially those of you out there in podcast land and new subscribers. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment here on YouTube. Find me on YouTube if you're not on YouTube, if you want to. And also look for me on Facebook. Just search for Xandar's Meteor. Don't put the apostrophe in there. And on Twitter, I am Xandar's Meteor as one word. Again, no apostrophe. Or you can email me at xandarsmeteor@gmail.com. And Xandar's Meteor is XANDARSMETEOR. So xandarsmeteor@gmail.com. Eventually, like I said before, I will take this, I'll either take pre-recorded or live calls on the podcast. But for now, I'm just gonna continue stumbling through this podcast and see where we end. The subject that I have today is actually ridicule and mockery. It's something that I've talked about before on YouTube. About a year ago, I posted up a video called Ridicule and Mockery for the Win, with a question mark at the end of it. And in it, I talked about how a lot of people, atheists and otherwise, jump straight to the point and laugh, ridicule and mock, and make fun of other people for the beliefs that they have or the lack of beliefs that they have, and just go straight to the point and laugh and shame them in order to make them feel stupid about their beliefs or their comments and their suggestions. And in the video that I created, it basically kind of came down to me saying, well, yes, ridicule and mockery do have their place, and I believe that ridicule and mockery shouldn't be your first go-to. But in thinking about all of that, after I made the video and in a discussion that I had with Loud Signal, who has a very great idea for a website that he's already begun building, it's loudsignal.com. And I talked to him over on Reddit one day, and he brought up the subject of ridicule and mockery, and he went off and he watched my video, and he came back and said, essentially, I want to hear more about this. What do you actually feel about this? Because he doesn't believe that ridicule and mockery are really all that effective. And to get straight to that point, I don't actually believe it's very effective. I don't believe that ridiculing and mocking someone for their beliefs or for their positions on anything is really all that productive if you're attempting to change the minds of the person that you're talking to or talking about. But, as Loud Signal said, it does kind of turn into, once you get to the ridicule and mockery point where you're just making fun of each other for having the beliefs that you have, you've gotten it stuck. You're now in an echo chamber, which is what he called it, where those of you that already agree with you are going to continue to sit there and amen what you're saying, and those that disagree are going to continue to poo-poo everything that you say, and you're essentially just talking to you're preaching to the choir. And I agree and I disagree, because if nothing else, I remember that when I very first started my journey into atheism, and I do still have a deconversion story that I need to do in production quality on YouTube, so I'm not going to talk a lot about what caused me to deconvert and everything that was involved in that, but I'll allude to it from time to time. And one of the things that I have mentioned before is that Thunderfoot's Why Do People Laugh at Creationists video series was one of the first things that I watched on YouTube that actually had to do with atheism and had to do with people coming up with the real science behind the insanity, to counter the insanity of creationists, young Earth creationists especially. And that was all about ridicule and mockery. I mean, that was the entire point. And I'll talk a little bit more about Thunderfoot's points, or Thunderfoot's, what's the word I'm looking for? His modus operandi, his mode of operation, the way that he actually does this. But when it comes down to it, he doesn't just point and laugh. He points out the absurdity and then leaves the laughing to us. So in his first videos where he's taking on Venom Fang X, he just says, okay, here's what would happen if what you claim happened actually happened. And we sit back and we watch the video and we go, oh, wow, that is so hilarious that anybody would believe something so stupid. And we laugh and we mock. The approach is completely and totally different. It's not a point and laugh approach. It's here's the absurdity of the ideas. And then the reaction is ridicule and mockery on our point. So I went through and I read a little bit of Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens, which Dennett is probably the nicest of the four horsemen. I don't really like calling them that, but everybody knows who I'm talking about when I say it. But Dennett is probably the nicest, and from everything that I've read and all of the interviews and everything that I have seen on Daniel Dennett, he doesn't really go into the mockery and ridicule at all. I could be wrong, I could have missed something along the way, but as it currently stands, I've never seen it. So, but on the other hand, the other three, Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens, pretty much have. Dawkins is calm and relatively civil when he's in a debate, but if you watch his reactions, he can get pretty flustered and upset when he has to spend a lot of time arguing against ignorance. Now, in his own words, and I found this in one of his videos, in his words, quote, "It is such a privilege to be born at all. It is an enormous privilege to be able to understand something about the universe in which we live. I can get angry about competing accounts that seem to me to not encourage that kind of questioning." So Dawkins even admits that he gets angry, and when he gets angry, he gets rather vitriolic, and that's fine, because once you get to the point where you're dealing with when you're dealing with ignorance on such a massive scale that it's willful ignorance, that the people that you're talking to, or that Dawkins is talking to in these cases, where they have just set themselves so against the facts that nothing is getting through to these people, what is the point? I mean, is there any need to maintain civility, or is it just, can you just say, you're a fucking moron, and what you believe is fucking stupid, and this conversation is done? If you can, when you get to that point, you might as well. So when it comes to Dawkins, he doesn't start that way, and he's very eloquent when he's calm, but when he gets pissed off, he can drop into it. Sam Harris, on the other hand, is he's, from what I have gathered, from what I've read and the debates that I've watched, he's actually very respectful, and I actually, other than jokingly, like to just kind of, shove the knife in a little bit further against arguments, he's not really insulting or mocking, so he probably shouldn't be included in this at all. But most of his arguments are based on sociological and psychological arguments, And they're backed up by studies, and they're backed up by the science. And I have yet to read his Free Will and his Lying, although I do have a PDF version. But I know that Harris is just calm and well-spoken, and I really like listening to him because he never drops in, from what I can tell, he never really drops into emotion. Again, except to be funny from time to time. And then there's Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens was vicious, and it's somewhat fitting that I'm talking about him a year after he left. I'm glad that I became an atheist before he died, because it gave me respect so that I was able to. No, I didn't pay him the respect while he was alive. I never talked to him. I never tweeted to him or anything like that. But I got to see, I got to see him as he fought against his cancer and showed up and still did some debates and did a lot of interviews, and he was just great. He was Christopher Hitchens. I mean, come on. But yeah, earlier today I watched a debate between him and a Jewish rabbi, and other than the sheer nonsense coming out of the rabbi's mouth, Hitchens actually remained respectful. But, like I said, he was vicious. He never wastes time responding to arguments that are so incredulous and ignorant, because it's kind of like how Dawkins won't actually debate against creationists. He doesn't want to give them the time of day. And and in Hitchens' case, he never wanted to waste time on the personal attacks against him. He just accepted the fact that was par for the course. When you say things like Mother Teresa was a horrible person that deserves to burn in the hell that, if it does exist, that's where she should be, yeah, you're going to get a lot of people that will just attack you directly for what you're saying. But he also backed it up with his journalistic his skills. And he did not believe that people should be treated with ridicule, but he definitely believed that religion should be treated with ridicule. Again, to quote him, religion should be treated with ridicule, hatred, and contempt. So, that is a little bit different than mockery and ridicule alone. But, yeah, ridicule. He did not respect the beliefs. And that's one of the things that I've actually picked up on. I don't respect it. It's a big argument that theists and atheists have all the time, which is, why don't you respect my beliefs? And I mean, it's usually coming from the theist side. But the theists are saying, why don't you respect my beliefs? And the atheists are saying, because your beliefs don't make any sense. Because your beliefs are not based on anything that's true. Because your beliefs are based on old manuscripts written by people who didn't know any better. And because of this attachment to a 2,000 to 5,000 year old document, we're stuck in moving forward as a society because you won't let go of the stupid shit that's in there. You know what? I completely and totally agree with that. And I've actually mentioned before, I think in one of my question and answer videos, where it's like, if you want to take the Bible and take the lessons that are good and actually benefit society as a whole, and put those together into a new Bible and create a new religion, I almost don't even have a problem with that. I do have a problem with it because you're going to continue to try and convince people to believe it based on faith and believe that this is something true and accurate because of where it came from, as opposed to because it is actually true and accurate. But I would be okay with that compared to the stupid shit that we have to deal with now, with the Westboro Baptist Church talking about God hates fags, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but with the Connecticut shooting that just happened yesterday, on Friday, for those of you not listening on the day of, but Mike Huckabee's, and what's the other dude's name? Alex Jones, and all of these people that are saying, we wouldn't have these problems if we had more God in our country, and of course they're talking about the Judeo-Christian God, and of course they're talking about wanting to force everybody to read their Bible and listen to the Bible and enforce the laws that are in the Bible, because if we followed all of these all of these prescriptions and all of these rules and regulations and laws, everybody would be a whole lot happier. And it's like, well, okay, while I don't believe that's true, let's assume that it's true. Let's assume that if we started following the law of Moses, let's assume that if we started following what Jesus taught even, was something that would benefit our society, what are we going to have? Well, we're going to have people that are newly Christian. Let's just go off of Jesus. We're going to have people that are newly Christians that don't feel like they are living up to the expectations of Jesus enough, and they're going to go and kill their entire family so that they will stop loving them, so that they'll love Jesus more than they love their family. And we'll be stoning homosexuals, and we'll be stoning unruly children, and we'll be sacrificing doves in order to cure leprosy, which isn't really a problem, so I'm sure we could find something else, in venereal disease or whatnot. But we would be doing all of these things as we'd be cutting people's hands off. We'd be cutting women's hands off if they touch the groin of two fighting men. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think that that's even something that we would want to do, let alone using those rules and those laws as examples of how we can make our country better. It just doesn't make sense. And they understand that, but they're willfully pushing this agenda forward because that's what they were taught. That's what they were taught, and they're unable to think for themselves. That's what I honestly and truthfully believe about these people. They are not actually teaching what they believe. They're not teaching what makes sense to them. They're teaching what they were taught to believe. So they're just continuing, and they're just propagating myths and lies and stupidity. So anyway, like I said, I'll talk about the Connecticut thing a little bit later, but I'm not going to touch on it too much. So, another point that I wanted to make here, and especially that when it comes to like what I said about Christopher Hitchens, where he believed that religion should be treated with ridicule, but not the people themselves. The point, I mean, that's a big point. When you're ridiculing or mocking religion and religious ideas, there is that fine line between ridiculing and mocking the ideas, and then just dropping into ad hominem attacks. I mean, ignorance isn't necessarily a bad thing, because actually ignorance is, what's the word I'm looking for? Ignorance is, to a degree, although I just can't find the word I want, so I'm going to use this one. Ignorance is humbling yourself to knowing that you don't know. And that's actually a good thing if you understand and accept and admit that you don't know. When we find that we're ignorant about something, we have two choices. We can either choose to actually go out and be open and willing and learn and expand our minds beyond our preconceptions and our ingrained biases, and learn and change our minds based on the information, and we can look at the facts and we can say, I did not know this, and I want to know more. Or, I mean, I've had that happen. It happened very recently, again, on YouTube, that my initial reaction to the question of whether the churches should be taxed, my initial answer was no. I don't believe that the churches should be taxed. While I understand that there are a lot of benefits to taxing the church, basically the money that goes back into the communities, the money that goes back into the government, etc., and all of the property taxes, etc., there are a lot of reasons why you should tax the church. But there are also other reasons that I had at the time. And so what that caused me to do was, first of all, someone left a comment that said, I don't think you're really thinking about this. I don't think you really understand what you're talking about. And I said, you're right. Thank you very much. I'm going to go and I'm going to find out more. And so I spent an afternoon reading through some tax code, reading through some other things that I needed to read through in order to try and translate everything so that I could understand what was actually impacted by not taxing the churches and what would be impacted if we did tax the churches. And then I sat down and I did another 15-20 minute video talking about all of the ways that we would actually benefit from taxing the churches. So at the end of that video, which was only a day after I said, I don't believe that we need to tax the churches, I was saying, at the end of that video, I agree. We should tax the church. So I was willing to admit the fact that I was ignorant of the facts. I was ignorant of the broader and, well, not the broader, the more specific view of what I was talking about. And instead of saying, no, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, and it's bad because that's what I was taught, or it's bad because that's what I believe, and you're not going to change my mind, I actually went out and I educated myself, and I came back with a reasoned argument as to why we actually should be taxing the churches. And so, if you can be open, which is path number one, be open to the fact that you don't know everything, and that ignorance isn't a bad thing necessarily, then you can learn and you can grow, and that's how we do it. That's how we've been our entire lives. You're not going to go up to an eight-year-old and talk to the 8-year-old about quantum mechanics, and when the 8-year-old doesn't know what you're talking about, you're not going to start pointing and laughing at them because they're ignorant to quantum mechanics. They don't understand it because they've never even been told that it exists. It's not something in their world. It doesn't exist within their minds. And so until you educate them on quantum mechanics, yeah, they're ignorant. But if you go to an 8-year-old kid and the kid decides this is boring and I don't want to hear about it, he's not choosing to be willfully ignorant. He's 8 years old. But if you're talking to someone that's 30 years old or 20 years old or old enough to actually make the decisions and to say, this is what I believe, and you go to them and you say, well, this is why I think that you're wrong, and they say, well, I don't care why you think I'm wrong, I'm going to stick to my guns because an old moldy book told me so, then they're choosing to be willfully ignorant, and at that point, there isn't anything left. You really can't do anything else. So, when we mock, we aren't always just speaking to the audience and creating that echo chamber where other atheists and other people that agree with us are getting anything out of the comments, but sometimes that is what actually happens. Now, all of the debates that I've watched or listened to are usually just 2 or more parties that are trying to argue for their position to a group of observers that do generally stay on one side or the other. When you go to listen to Christopher Hitchens, chances are whoever he's debating against or having a discussion with is not going to change your mind. You're not going to walk out of there and go, wow, Christopher Hitchens has been so wrong all this time. How could he argue that anymore? It just doesn't happen a lot. And so, again, in that situation, especially in a debate type situation, throwing in the ad hominems and throwing in the mockery and ridicule doesn't really do anything. All it makes you look like is, well, to fill a stereotype for a lot of theists out there especially, it just makes you look like an angry atheist, if that's all you do. But again, this is all situational. Ridicule and mockery, in my opinion, shouldn't be step one, ever. But it has its place. So, also, depending on the topic, I mean, there was the Intelligent Square debate in 2009 where Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry debated the Catholic Church. It was, who was he? The Archdiocese, I believe, from a country in Africa. I don't remember which. But anyway, the entire point of that was that the Catholic Church was arguing that the Archdiocese was arguing that the Catholic Church is a force for good, and Stephen Hitchens, I've mixed them together now. Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry were obviously on the opposing side, saying that the Catholic Church is not a force of good in the world. And they did do it a before and after vote. So there were a lot of people in there that they either felt, well, the vote is a great way to determine when you walk in the door, what do you believe? Which side are you going to actually, stand by most likely? And at the end of the debate, the votes from the people, so before and after, they took a vote before and afterwards, there was a massive change in the people that, when they entered the debate, thought that the Catholic Church was a force for good, switching over to the side where they thought that the Catholic Church was not a force for good in the world. So, it was actually pretty astonishing, the numbers. I don't have the numbers right up here, so I can't tell you what they were, but I highly recommend that you go look that one up. And again, that was Hitchens and Fry. It was an Intelligent Square debate, and it was in 2009. It was also a really good debate. So, like I've said, mockery and ridicule generally is a last resort, and some of the arguments weighed against that claim brought up the fact that many atheists skip the weight and that they go straight for the jugular. And sometimes, well, it's a sticky wicket. Let's call it that. Many times we do actually see this tactic, but a lot of times it's also because there's already been a precedent set. I've hit on this already a couple of times, but when a debater or a theist, and sometimes even some atheists, have time again asked the same questions and received answers to those questions that are, and I'm gonna stick with the theists more than atheists here, but when a theist keeps asking questions and they've already received the answers that are given to them with the science and that are validated scientific answers, then they're either being dishonest when they continue to ask those questions, and it should be called out, because they're being willfully ignorant. Again, willful ignorance to me is unforgivable. You should call people out for remaining ignorant in the face of information to the contrary. If that person should be ignored and shoved into the realm of insignificance, fine. A lot of people like to get a parting shot in. So a lot of times that ridicule and mockery is just an atheist's way, or anybody's way really, of saying, you know what? I've spent more than enough time on you. I'm now done. You're a fucking moron. Go away. But other times it's just the nature of the person. Just like you would ask P.Z. Myers or Richard Dawkins to participate in a biological proof for a naturalistic explanation of life and the origins of humanity, you might turn to Hitchens, or you might have turned to Hitchens, or maybe even Matt Dillahunty from the Atheist Experience, if you want to have arguments from theists basically eviscerated based on the immorality and unjustified claims of theists. Did either Hitchens or does Dillahunty jump straight to mockery and ridicule? No. But they also won't allow poor arguments to continue to be presented. Anyone that's watched the Atheist Experience or listened to the Atheist Experience, whenever Matt's on there and the other hosts, with whatever host and co-host, when that caller is given a chance to state what they believe and why, then they begin deconstructing it. And from time to time, you can just watch Matt just get frustrated from having to lay to rest the same shitty arguments over and over again. It wears everybody down, and next thing you know it's ridicule and mockery for the rest of that call. And that's completely and totally justified. Because really, what else are you going to do? I mean, when they have reached the point where they have just gone completely and totally sideways, then there is absolutely no point in sticking around and trying to have a rational discussion with them. And I wish I had an example, but I don't have one right now. So, another person, Richard the Dick Coughlin. Those of you that are on YouTube know him. He pretty much goes straight for the jugular, but most of the time, he's already been embroiled in a conversation with that person. So, what we see a lot of times on the videos is, holy shit, Richard the Dick Coughlin just went apeshit on this person, lost his mind, and he's going, straight for the ad hominems, and although, actually, I don't know. Well, yeah, sometimes he does. But anyway, essentially what you're seeing is the culmination of a conversation that's been going on via Twitter. I follow him on Twitter, and I see some conversations go on Twitter, and then next thing you know he's got a video up that actually is in response to some of the stuff that's been going on Twitter, and same thing with Facebook. So he has all kinds of other avenues that he's doing, and then he uses YouTube pretty much as kind of an outlet, and he says, okay, here, we're going to have this conversation. But it's not a conversation, it's me telling you what a worthless cunt you are. And that's Richard Dick Coughlin's style. That's something that people like about him, and that's one of the reasons why he has as many subscribers, and one of the reasons why he does appear to be crazy, is because he's already had the conversation. He's now done with the conversation. So most of the time you see him, he's just fed up and he's just letting loose. And then again, coming back to Thunderfoot's Why Do People Laugh at Creationists, got me started on my path to atheism, and then, again, it seems like he's going to just go through and it's going to be all ridicule and mockery, but when you watch the videos, he just takes the creationist claims, applies science, and shows the absurdity of them, and then just kind of leaves it there. And then at the very end, why do people laugh at creationists? Only they don't understand. And it's all because we are the ones that can make our own judgments. It's a great tactic. It does have a little bit of bias in the sense that you're making fun of them, but also at the same time, you're not making fun of them. You're just pointing out how crazy they are. So there's that. Another one, again, a lot of this is about YouTube. Those of you that aren't on YouTube, I do apologize for talking about YouTube so much, but that's where I got my start. It's what started me on this path, and this is actually me trying to branch out beyond YouTube, as well as stay on YouTube and be more active on YouTube. So you'll hear a lot of YouTube. I'll say drama, but I'm not going to say drama because I generally stay out of any of the YouTube drama that goes on. But another one of my favorites on YouTube is The Living Dinosaur. Now, Living Dinosaur, first of all, I love his videos. I've always loved his videos, and his videos were most of the inspiration for the style of videos that I started making. I'll never have the attention to detail nor the skill set that he has, and I'm fine with that because he's got his version and his way of doing things, and I don't ever want to be totally accused of ripping him off because his videos are awesome. If he ever puts them in just audio form, I highly recommend listening to him. Although the slides that he uses are excellent. But he does jump straight to ridicule and mockery because he has first-hand knowledge of the reality and the scientific principles that refute the claims being made by the other people that are putting out videos on YouTube. So when he provides the evidence and sources that refute the claims, his mockery and his ridicule are mostly just to underline and highlight the willful ignorance of those making the claims. He takes on what's that guy? P.P. Simmons and a bunch of other, basically anybody that wants to be, well, anyone that makes the mistake of posting something up on YouTube that is fallacious. And especially when it comes to scientifically fallacious. He will jump straight on it. And it's because that's his style. It's the same thing. Most of the time you see him, it's, oh, you've got to be kidding me. You know, this person has done it again, and you'll even hear him from time to time mention that he didn't want to jump straight into making fun of the person until he saw a bit of their video that proved that they were just as stupid as he initially thought that they probably were. And so he goes for it, and that's his style. So it does happen, and it can happen, and people do choose to go that path, and some people love it, some people don't like it. Sometimes it's preaching to the choir, sometimes it actually deconverts or converts. So it's known to happen. When it comes to YouTube, I've pretty much stayed out of the whole ponage videos and confrontational situations because I don't really want to get into having an ongoing argument with anyone. It just doesn't really seem like something that I would enjoy all that much. So, yeah. So I'm winding this down, and I've got 8 minutes of recording to hit 60 minutes, so I'm trying to figure out exactly if I want to just put in like a 30-second intro, or, I don't know, maybe if I could come up with a 5-minute intro, I'd only have to record for 3 more minutes. But I do want to have a full hour of podcast for you all. So I'm just going to go over a couple more things here. Again, this is podcast number 1. I am hoping that as time goes by, I will get this format down, I will get the notes down, I will get the pauses in my voice down. I know that listening to myself sometimes I sort of feel like I sound like William Shatner, where my sentences just go like this. And it drives me nuts, and hopefully me pointing that out to you doesn't actually cause you all to think the same thing and drive you all insane. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. It'll be a little early, so it'll be a little bit less than an hour. But I just wanted to say thank you all for making it this far and listening to me. If you have any subject ideas or if you have any other ideas for the podcast, please go ahead and hit me up. Like I said before, either leave a comment here on YouTube, or if you're listening to this out there in the non-YouTube world, hit me up on Facebook or on Twitter, or you can send me an email at xandersmeteor@gmail.com. Remember, Xanders starts with an X. And, yeah, I am glad that I'm here. I'm glad that I have become a part of this community of people that I actually greatly enjoy being around and interacting with. And I hope that as the years go by, I will meet some of you in the real world. I'm hoping that as time goes by, I will start going to some of the atheist conventions. I was thinking about going to the American Atheist Convention in Austin this coming, I believe it's March. Might be May. but I'm not going to actually make it. Having just started back at the job that I'm working at, I don't have a whole lot of vacation, so I don't really want to use my vacation for that. I want to use my vacation to go somewhere, lay on the beach, and drink alcohol, because that sounds like more fun right now. Of course, it's just beginning to get winter here in Seattle, and so that's another thing. If any of you are in Seattle, please hit me up. We need to get together sometime soon. I'd like to meet some of you in person. I'd also like to begin a new Seattle Atheist type group. And eventually, as I have mentioned before on other videos, but for those of you listening to my podcast, this is brand new news to you. I would eventually like to have a cable access TV show that will be pretty much the Seattle version of the Atheist Experience. It's something that I have my sights set on. So that's going to happen one of these days. The more people that I can get involved, the easier it'll be to have that actually become a reality. So, thank you everyone, and I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season. I will not be back on YouTube other than for comments. I won't be posting anything, at least until after Christmas. And yes, I do celebrate Christmas because it's a damn fun time of the year. And the Christmas lights all over my neighborhood are absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and I love them every single day that I drive home in the dark. But Merry Christmas to those of you that celebrate it. Happy holidays to everyone else. And Happy New Year in case I don't talk to you before New Year. So this has been the Atheist Impact. I'm Xandar's Meteor. Have an awesome day.